My name is Hector, 68 years old, and I never thought my own son would scream at me to stop living off him. Jackson, my only child, the boy I raised alone after his mother died, threatened to kick me out of his house. The worst part? I had sold my home to help him with his mortgage just months earlier. I still remember his exact words that shattered my heart into a million pieces. If you have ever felt betrayed by someone you sacrificed everything for, please hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know where you are watching from, and if you have experienced family betrayal like mine. I became a single father when my wife Dorothy lost her battle with breast cancer. Jackson was only 12 years old when she passed. Those first few years were the hardest of my life. I would wake up every morning at 4:30 to prepare breakfast and lunch for my son before driving him to school. Then I would head straight to my construction job, working 10-hour shifts in the scorching heat or freezing cold. Most days, I would pick up evening shifts at the local grocery store, stocking shelves until midnight. Sleep was a luxury I could rarely afford. There were days when my body ached so badly I could barely stand, but I never complained. Not once. Jackson needed stability, and I was determined to give it to him no matter the cost to myself. Dating was something I simply did not have time for. A couple of women showed interest over the years, but I always put Jackson first. One relationship with a lovely woman named Patricia almost led to marriage, but she wanted to move to Arizona for a job opportunity. Jackson was in high school and thriving. I could not uproot him, so I let Patricia go. Sometimes I wonder what life would have been like if I had chosen differently, but I never regretted prioritizing my son. Despite the financial challenges, I managed our money carefully. I paid off our modest 3-bedroom home in the suburbs by the time Jackson turned 20. I set up a college fund that covered most of his education at State University, where he studied business management. I even managed to build a decent retirement nest egg through consistent investments in my 401k and some smart real estate decisions, buying and fixing up 2 small rental properties that provided steady income. Jackson graduated with honors and landed a job at a promising tech company. He was smart, driven, and climbed the corporate ladder quickly. By his late 30s, he was a senior manager making 6 figures, married to Allison, and had 2 beautiful children, Emma, age 10, and Tyler, age 8. They bought a 5-bedroom house in an upscale neighborhood, the kind of place I could only dream of providing when he was growing up. I was so proud of him, of the man he had become. Last year, at 67, I had a minor accident at the construction site. Nothing serious, just a fall that resulted in a sprained ankle and some bruises. But it was enough of a wake-up call to finally retire. I had been working in construction for over 40 years by then. My body was telling me it was time to slow down. 2 months after my retirement, Jackson invited me to Sunday dinner. As we sat on their back deck watching the kids play, he made an unexpected proposal. "Dad, Allison and I have been talking," he said, swirling his glass of expensive bourbon, something I could never afford to develop a taste for. "We think you should sell your house and move in with us. The kids adore you, and we have that spare bedroom suite on the first floor. After your fall, we worry about you living alone." I was surprised, but touched by his concern. "Are you sure? I would not want to impose on your family life." "Nonsense," Jackson laughed, patting my shoulder. "You took care of me my whole life. Let us return the favor." Allison nodded enthusiastically. The children would love having their grandfather here full-time. And honestly, we could use the help with after-school pickups and activities. It seemed like the perfect arrangement. I sold my home for $350,000, a decent profit from the $70,000 I had originally paid decades ago. Jackson mentioned they were looking to refinance their mortgage, so I offered $200,000 to help pay it down. He accepted gratefully, promising to add my name to the house deed, though that paperwork somehow never materialized. The remaining money went into my savings account, which I later added Jackson to as a joint holder, just in case anything happened to me. It seemed like the responsible thing to do at the time. The first few months were wonderful. I had my own space, a beautiful room with an attached bathroom and small sitting area. I helped around the house, cooking meals 3 times a week, taking the kids to their various activities, and handling small repairs. Every evening, we would eat dinner together, sharing stories and laughs. I taught Tyler how to throw a baseball properly and helped Emma with her science projects. I felt useful, loved, and part of a family again. Jackson and Allison seemed genuinely happy to have me there. Jackson would often join me for coffee in the mornings before work, reminiscing about his childhood or asking my advice on various matters. Allison would bring me little treats from her baking experiments and ask about family recipes. The grandchildren would climb into my lap for bedtime stories, just as Jackson had done as a boy. I remember thinking how lucky I was, how perfect things had turned out. After decades of hard work and sacrifice, I was finally enjoying the fruits of my labor, surrounded by my family in a beautiful home. I had no idea how quickly it would all fall apart. The changes were so subtle at first that I almost did not notice them. Jackson stopped joining me for morning coffee, always rushing out with just a quick goodbye. Our dinner conversations grew shorter, with long stretches of silence broken only by the children's chatter. Allison began serving me separately, claiming I might prefer to eat earlier than the rest of the family. I tried to compensate by being even more helpful. I started waking up earlier to prepare breakfast for everyone. I took over more household chores, mowing the lawn weekly and handling all the minor repairs. I even started a small vegetable garden in the backyard, teaching the grandchildren about growing food just as I had taught Jackson years ago. One Tuesday afternoon, I returned home earlier than expected from taking Emma to her piano lesson. As I walked through the front door, I heard Jackson on the phone in his home office, the door slightly ajar. "Yeah, it is becoming a bit of a burden," he was saying, his voice lowered but still audible. "Dad is getting older, needs more attention. Honestly, I did not realize how much work it would be having him here." I froze in the hallway, my heart suddenly heavy in my chest. No, we cannot just send him to a home," Jackson continued. "But between you and me, Allison has been researching some really nice assisted living communities." I quietly retreated and took Emma to get ice cream, trying to process what I had heard. That night, I could barely sleep, replaying his words over and over in my mind. A burden. That is what I had become to my own son. The following week, Allison began making casual comments about her friend's father who loved his new senior living apartment. "They have so many activities," she mentioned while loading the dishwasher. "Swimming pools, game nights, even dating mixers for singles. Sounds nice," I replied non-committally, noticing how she avoided eye contact. When Jackson's birthday approached, I wanted to take the family out to his favorite steakhouse. I mentioned it at breakfast, and the uncomfortable silence that followed spoke volumes. "That is very generous, Hector," Allison finally said. "But we already have plans with some friends from work. Maybe another time?" It was the first birthday of his I had not celebrated with him since he was born. During a neighborhood barbecue, I overheard Jackson talking to his neighbor. "Yeah, Dad sold his house and moved in with us. Retirement has been tough on him financially." The neighbor expressed admiration for Jackson's generosity, and my son basked in the praise without correction. I wanted to speak up, to remind him that I had contributed $200,000 to his mortgage, that I bought groceries weekly, that I had never been financially insecure. Instead, I walked away, the familiar ache of disappointment burning in my chest. When I tried to use my debit card at the hardware store the following week, it was declined. Confused, I called the bank only to discover that the balance in our joint account had dropped significantly. When I cautiously brought this up with Jackson, he dismissed it. "Just some household expenses, Dad. Nothing to worry about. I will transfer some money back next week." But the money was never returned, and I did not push the issue, not wanting to create tension. The final blow came during a dinner with Jackson's college friends and their families. As we all sat around the large dining table, one friend asked me about my life. "Jackson tells us you were a remarkable single dad," he said kindly. "Must have been challenging raising him on your own." I began sharing stories of those early years, the struggles and joys, when Jackson interrupted. Dad tends to exaggerate," he said with a forced laugh. He had lots of help from grandparents and neighbors. It was not quite the solo hero journey he remembers. The table fell awkwardly silent. My own mother had been dead for years before Dorothy passed, and her parents lived across the country, visiting perhaps once a year. Neighbors had occasionally watched Jackson in emergencies, but the daily grind of raising him had fallen squarely on my shoulders alone. I excused myself from the table and spent the remainder of the evening in my room, a knot forming in my stomach. Something had changed in my son, something fundamental, and I could not understand why. The boy I had raised, who had been kind and grateful, seemed to be vanishing before my eyes, replaced by someone I barely recognized. That night, I lay awake wondering what I had done wrong, how I had failed him as a father. The distance between us was growing daily, and I felt powerless to bridge it. The comfortable room that had once felt like a haven now seemed more like a gilded cage, and for the first time since moving in, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. Emma's 10th birthday arrived, and I wanted to make it special. Without consulting Jackson or Allison, I purchased the latest tablet model she had been talking about for months, spending almost $700 from my dwindling personal savings. When Emma unwrapped it at her party, her eyes lit up with joy as she threw her arms around my neck. That moment of pure happiness was short-lived. Jackson pulled me aside, his face flushed with anger. "What were you thinking, Dad? That is way too expensive. We already got her the art supplies she wanted." "I wanted to do something special for my granddaughter," I replied, confused by his reaction. "Well, next time check with us first," he snapped. "We are trying to teach the kids about not being materialistic, and you just undermined that completely." Later that evening, I overheard Jackson and Allison talking in their bedroom as I passed by to get a glass of water. "He cannot just spend money like that without consulting us," Allison was saying, her voice tense. "Emma will expect expensive gifts from now on." "I know," Jackson sighed heavily. "Look, I checked out Pine Grove Retirement Community yesterday. They have an opening next month." "Is it affordable?" Allison asked. "They accept Medicare, and Dad has some savings left. Plus, once we sell those rental properties of his, there should be plenty." I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand gripping the wall for support. Rental properties? My 2 small rental homes had been my retirement security, generating about $2,500 monthly in income. I had never discussed selling them, and certainly had never given Jackson authority to do so. The next morning, I called my bank only to discover that Jackson had indeed been making inquiries about my accounts, using the joint account access to request information he should not have had. When I checked my investment portfolio, I found several recent withdrawals I had not authorized, totaling almost $40,000. With growing unease, I decided to confront him that evening. I waited until the children were in bed, and Allison was on a video call with her sister. "Jackson, I need to talk to you about my finances," I began cautiously. He barely looked up from his laptop. "What about them?" "There have been some withdrawals from my investment account that I did not authorize." His fingers stopped typing, but his eyes remained fixed on the screen. "I was going to tell you about that. We had some unexpected expenses with the house. The roof needed repairs." $40,000 worth of repairs? "Well, not just the roof. There were other things. Property taxes were higher than expected, too." He finally looked at me, his expression defensive. "Look, Dad, you are living here rent-free. We are feeding you, covering your utilities. Those expenses add up. I contributed $200,000 to this house," I reminded him, "and I buy groceries weekly, help with the children, maintain the yard." "That is different," he dismissed. "Anyway, I was planning to pay it back once my year-end bonus comes through." I wanted to believe him, but something did not feel right. "Jackson, if you are having financial problems, we can discuss them openly. I am still your father." His face hardened. "I do not have financial problems. I make plenty of money." "Then why take from my retirement funds without asking?" "Because it was convenient, okay?" he snapped. "I did not think you would make such a big deal about it." The conversation ended there, with nothing resolved. That night, I used Jackson's computer while he and Allison were out at a dinner party. I knew his password, the name of his first dog combined with his birth year, something he had never changed since college. What I found shocked me to my core. Jackson was deep in debt. Credit card statements showed balances of over $60,000 across multiple cards. There were letters from collection agencies for unpaid medical bills. Most alarming was an email from his company HR department discussing a performance improvement plan, suggesting his job might be in jeopardy. I also found emails between Jackson and a real estate agent discussing the potential sale of my rental properties, complete with a forged signature on a power of attorney document that I had never signed. The next day, I tried a different approach, making Jackson his favorite breakfast, and suggesting we spend some time together over the weekend. We could go fishing, like we used to, I offered. Just the two of us. I do not have time for fishing, Dad, he replied irritably. Some of us still have to work for a living. The barb stung, but I persisted. Jackson, I know something is bothering you. If you are having financial difficulties, I am not having financial difficulties, he shouted, slamming his coffee mug down so hard that it cracked. Why do you keep saying that? Just because you could never earn a decent living does not mean I have the same problem. Allison entered the kitchen, looking alarmed. Everything okay in here? Everything is fine, Jackson muttered. My father just cannot mind his own business. As the days passed, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly tense. Jackson began coming home later and later, often smelling of alcohol. Allison started scheduling the children for play dates and activities when she knew I would be home, limiting my time with them. When I asked Emma if she wanted to work on a science project together, she looked nervously at her mother before declining. Mom says I should do my schoolwork by myself now, she explained, her eyes downcast. I was being systematically isolated from the family I loved, and it was breaking my heart. The final straw came when I discovered that Jackson had attempted to contact the tenants in my rental properties directly, telling them to redirect their rent payments to a new account that I had no access to. One tenant, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had rented from me for over 15 years, called me confused about the arrangement. That was when I knew I needed to take action before I lost everything. Not just my relationship with my son, but my financial independence as well. It was a Tuesday evening when everything finally exploded. Jackson came home later than usual, his tie loosened, and his eyes bloodshot. The children were already in bed, and Allison was quietly reading in the living room, barely acknowledging my presence as I worked on a crossword puzzle nearby. When Jackson stormed into the house, slamming the front door behind him, Allison looked up with concern. Rough day? She asked cautiously. You could say that, he muttered, heading straight for the liquor cabinet and pouring himself a generous glass of whiskey. He downed half of it in one gulp before turning to glare at me. Dad, we need to talk. I set my crossword aside. Of course, son. What is on your mind? I got a call from Mrs. Rodriguez today, he said, his voice dangerously low. Seems you have been filling her head with all sorts of nonsense about me trying to steal your rent money. I simply clarified that the rent arrangements remain unchanged, I replied calmly. She was confused by your instructions. My instructions? His voice rose sharply. Those properties are family assets. I was just trying to consolidate the finances. They are my properties, Jackson. I bought them, maintained them, and they provide my retirement income. Allison set her book down and stood up. Maybe I should check on the kids, she said, clearly uncomfortable with the brewing confrontation. No, stay, Jackson commanded. Dad seems to think I am some kind of thief, so let us get everything out in the open right now. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. I do not think you are a thief, Jackson. I think you are having financial problems that you are not being honest about, and instead of asking for help, you are trying to take control of my assets. Financial problems? He laughed bitterly. That is rich coming from you. Who is living in whose house right now? Who is paying the property taxes on this place? The utilities? The groceries? I contributed $200,000 to this house, I reminded him. I buy groceries regularly. I maintain the yard, cook meals, watch the children. I am hardly a freeloader. 200,000? He scoffed. That barely made a dent in the mortgage on a place like this. Do you have any idea what a house in this neighborhood costs? What it takes to maintain our lifestyle? A lifestyle you clearly cannot afford, I said quietly, immediately regretting my words. Jackson's face contorted with rage. He slammed his glass down on the coffee table, whiskey splashing onto the polished wood. "Stop living off me," he shouted, his voice echoing through the house. "You think you contributed? That money was nothing. A pittance. You have been living here for months, eating our food, using our electricity, our water." I stood up, my legs unsteady beneath me. "Jackson, please lower your voice. The children, do not bring my children into this. You know what, Dad? If you think I am such a financial disaster, maybe you should get out. Get a job, support yourself, or find somewhere else to live. You invited me here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You suggested I sell my home. Well, it was a mistake. The biggest mistake I have ever made." He was pacing now, gesturing wildly. "You know what your problem is? You have always been financially irresponsible. Mom died, and instead of remarrying someone who could help support us, you played the martyr single dad. We could have had a better life. The mention of Dorothy, of our life together, the sacrifices I had made, hit me like a physical blow. I reached for my phone on the side table. "I think I should call Thomas," I said, referring to my oldest friend, a retired attorney who had helped me with legal matters for decades. Jackson snatched the phone from my hand. "You are not calling anyone. This is between us." "Give me my phone, Jackson," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Or what?" he sneered. "You will ground me? Take away my allowance? Newsflash, Dad, I am the head of this household, not you. You are here on my charity." I looked at Allison, hoping for some intervention, but she stood silently, her arms wrapped around herself, eyes fixed on the floor. "I think," I said slowly, "that I should go to my room now. We can discuss this when you are calmer." "Sure, retreat to your room in my house," Jackson spat. "But think about what I said. Either get a job and start contributing properly, or start looking for somewhere else to live. I am done carrying you." I walked to my room with as much dignity as I could muster, closed the door quietly behind me, and sat on the edge of my bed, my hands trembling. In the distance, I could hear Jackson and Allison arguing in hushed, urgent tones. Then came the sound of something shattering, followed by more shouting. That night, sleep eluded me entirely. I lay awake, replaying not just the horrible confrontation, but the entire journey that had led us here. Where had I gone wrong? Had I spoiled Jackson? Failed to teach him proper values? Or was this simply who he had always been, beneath the surface, waiting for the right circumstances to emerge? As dawn broke, I made a decision. This could not continue. For my own sake, for whatever remained of our relationship, something had to change. I would not be a prisoner in this house, dependent on the whims of a son who had forgotten everything I had taught him about respect and gratitude. I had spent my entire life putting Jackson first. Perhaps it was finally time to put myself first for once. When I heard the front door close as Jackson left for work, followed shortly by Allison taking the children to school, I packed a small bag with essential clothes and personal items. I wrote a brief note saying I needed some time away and would be in touch soon, leaving it on my neatly made bed. I called a taxi, not wanting to use the rideshare app on my phone that Jackson might be able to track. As the taxi pulled away from the house I had come to think of as home, a strange sense of both loss and liberation washed over me. For the first time in months, I was making my own decision. The taxi took me to a small coffee shop downtown where I had arranged to meet Thomas, my friend of over 40 years, and a retired attorney who had handled my modest legal affairs for decades. He was already waiting, his silver hair neatly combed, wearing a cardigan despite the warm weather. As always, His kind eyes showed immediate concern when he saw my face. "Hector, you look terrible," he said, standing to greet me with a firm handshake. "Have you slept at all?" "Not really," I admitted, settling into the chair across from him. "Thank you for meeting me on such short notice." "Of course. You sounded pretty shaken up on the phone. What is going on?" Over the next hour, I laid out everything that had happened since moving in with Jackson, from the initial warmth to the gradual cooling, the financial discoveries, and finally, the explosive confrontation. Thomas listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a small legal pad. "I need to know where I stand legally," I concluded. "The money I contributed to his house, my rental properties, my remaining savings. I am afraid of what Jackson might do." Thomas nodded gravely. "First things first. Your rental properties are safe. I checked the county records this morning, and there have been no transfers of ownership. Whatever document Jackson may have created would not hold up to scrutiny. As for the money you put into his house, I never got anything in writing," I admitted shamefully. "Without documentation, it would be treated as a gift rather than an investment in the property," Thomas explained. "We could fight it, but it would be your word against his. And my savings? You said he is on your main savings account as a joint holder?" I nodded. "Then legally, he has as much right to that money as you do. We should close that account immediately and open a new one in your name only." Thomas reached across the table and placed his hand on my arm. "Hector, there is something else you should know. I have been managing your financial affairs for years, and you are in a much stronger position than you realize." He pulled out a folder and opened it, revealing statements and documents. "Your rental properties have appreciated significantly. Property 1 is worth approximately $350,000 now, and Property 2 about $380,000. Your stock portfolio, which Jackson apparently does not know about because it is managed through my office, is worth just over $400,000. And your pension, combined with Social Security, provides you with about $3,700 monthly income." I stared at the numbers, slightly shocked myself. Living frugally for decades, I had lost track of how my careful investments had grown. "In total, your net worth is over $1 million, Hector. You are not a financial burden to anyone. In fact, you could buy a new house outright if you wanted to." The revelation was both comforting and infuriating. All this time, Jackson had been treating me like a charity case while attempting to siphon away my assets. "What should I do?" I asked. Thomas leaned back in his chair. "First, we protect your assets. Then, if you want, we can send a message." By the end of that day, we had accomplished several things. I had closed the joint savings account and opened a new one at a different bank. I had signed papers transferring management of my rental properties to a professional company that would deposit the rents directly into my new account. Thomas had helped me find a furnished one-bedroom apartment with a short-term lease, giving me time to decide on my next steps. But the most satisfying action was visiting Thomas's colleague, Sarah Johnson, a specialist in estate planning. Together, we drafted a new will that removed Jackson as my primary beneficiary. Instead, I established a trust for my grandchildren's education, with the bulk of my estate now directed to them, accessible only when they turned 25. Jackson would receive a token inheritance of $1,000, along with a letter explaining why. "Are you sure about this, Hector?" Sarah asked as I signed the documents. "Changing a will out of anger sometimes leads to regrets later." "I am not doing this out of anger," I replied, though that was not entirely true. "I am doing this to protect my grandchildren's future and to make sure Jackson understands there are consequences for his actions." Before leaving her office, I made one additional request. "Can you send a formal notification to Jackson that I have changed my will? I want him to know." Sarah raised an eyebrow but nodded. "It is unusual, but not improper. I can have a letter sent tomorrow." That evening, in my new apartment, surrounded by rental furniture and bare walls, I felt a strange peace. For the first time in months, I was not walking on eggshells, not monitoring my words and actions to avoid upsetting someone else. The apartment was small but clean, with a balcony overlooking a park. As I sat there watching the sunset, my phone began to ring. Jackson's name flashed on the screen. I silenced it and turned back to the view. Over the next 3 days, Jackson called 50 times. He left voicemails ranging from enraged, "How dare you just leave like that?" to plaintive, "Dad, please, we are worried about you," to threatening, "If you do not call back, I will report you as a missing person." I listened to each one but did not respond. I needed time to strengthen my resolve, to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. On the 4th day, Thomas called. "Jackson showed up at my office this morning," he said. "He was quite upset about the will notification. He demanded to know where you are." "What did you tell him?" "That you are my client, as well as my friend, and that your location is confidential, unless you choose to reveal it." Thomas paused. "He wants a meeting, Hector, with both of us." I considered this. Did he say why? He claims he wants to apologize and make things right. But given everything you have told me, I would approach with caution. I thought about it overnight and called Thomas back the next morning. "Set up the meeting," I said, "at your office, not at his house. And I want you present for the entire conversation." It was time to face my son and the hard truths that had come between us. Thomas's office had always struck me as a reflection of the man himself. Understated, dignified, and completely reliable. The dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and subtle scent of lemon polish created an atmosphere of stability and permanence. As I sat in one of the visitor chairs across from his substantial desk, I drew comfort from the familiar surroundings. "Are you sure you are ready for this?" Thomas asked, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed some documents. "As ready as I will ever be," I replied, straightening my tie. I had dressed carefully that morning, choosing my best suit, the one I had worn to Jackson's wedding. I wanted to present myself not as a defeated old man, but as someone deserving of respect. At exactly 10 o'clock, Thomas's secretary announced Jackson's arrival. When my son walked through the door, I was shocked by his appearance. In just 1 week, he seemed to have aged years. His normally immaculate hair was unkempt, his eyes underlined by dark circles, his shirt wrinkled as if he had slept in it. "Dad," he said, his voice wavering slightly. He stepped forward as if to embrace me, then hesitated when I remained seated. Awkwardly, he took the chair beside me, angling it to face me rather than Thomas. "Thank you for coming, Jackson," I said formally, working to keep my voice steady. "Thomas has agreed to mediate our conversation." "Mediate?" Jackson frowned. "We do not need a mediator. We are family." "I think recent events suggest otherwise," I replied. "In any case, Thomas is here as my attorney as well as a witness." Jackson's expression darkened. "Is that really necessary? To have your attorney present to talk to your own son?" "I believe it is. Yes." Thomas cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should get started. Jackson, you requested this meeting. What would you like to discuss?" Jackson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I want to talk about this will situation. Dad, I received a letter saying you have changed your will to essentially disinherit me. Is that true?" "Yes, it is." "Because of one argument?" His voice rose incredulously. "One bad night when I said things I did not mean, and you throw away our entire relationship?" I took a deep breath. "It was not just one argument, Jackson. It was months of disrespect, of treating me like a burden, of attempting to take control of my assets without my consent. It was discovering you had been lying about your financial situation while trying to appropriate mine. That is not fair," he protested, but the flush creeping up his neck suggested otherwise. "I have bank statements," I continued, "showing unauthorized withdrawals from my accounts. I have emails you wrote to my tenants trying to redirect their rent payments. I have evidence of a forged power of attorney document." Jackson paled visibly. "I can explain all of that. I am listening." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Things at work have been difficult. There have been layoffs, and my position is not as secure as it once was. We overextended ourselves with the house, And then when Allison's mother needed that surgery last year, the medical bills just kept piling up. Why did you not just ask for my help? I questioned. Instead of trying to take control of my properties, my savings, because I was ashamed, he burst out. Okay? I was ashamed. I am supposed to be successful, to have everything under control. How could I tell you, the man who worked 3 jobs to support me, that I had failed to manage my own finances properly? So instead, you decided to make me feel unwelcome in your home? To treat me like a burden? To yell at me to get a job at 68 years old? Jackson looked down at his hands. I was stressed and drunk and angry at myself, not you. I lashed out at the wrong person. Thomas, who had been quietly observing, now intervened. Jackson, are you aware of your father's actual financial situation? What do you mean? Thomas nodded to me, and I took over. Jackson, I am not financially dependent on you. My net worth is over $1 million. His head snapped up, eyes wide with disbelief. What? That is impossible. You worked construction your whole life, and I saved consistently, invested wisely, and lived within my means, I explained. My rental properties alone are worth over $700,000 combined. My stock portfolio, which you apparently did not know about, is worth more than $400,000. My monthly income from my pension, Social Security, and rental properties is nearly $4,000. Jackson stared at me, mouth slightly open. But you always seemed so careful with money. You never took vacations, never bought new cars, because I was building security for my future, for what I thought would be your future too. I leaned forward. The $200,000 I contributed to your mortgage, that was not my life savings, Jackson. It was a gift I could easily afford, given to my son out of love. The revelation seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He slumped back in his chair, the color draining from his face. So, all this time, when you were trying to access my accounts, forge documents for my properties, you were not just being disrespectful. I continued, my voice hardening. You were attempting to steal from someone who would have given you anything if you had simply asked honestly. Dad, his voice broke. I do not know what to say. An apology would be a start, Thomas suggested dryly. Jackson wiped at his eyes. I am sorry. God, I am so sorry. I was desperate and scared and made terrible choices, but disinheriting me? That seems extreme. My will reflects my wishes for my estate, I stated firmly. Currently, those wishes are to establish trusts for Emma and Tyler's education and future. They will receive the bulk of my estate when they turn 25. And me, your only child? You will receive $1,000 and a letter explaining my decision. Jackson flinched as if I had slapped him. Can that be changed? Is there anything I can do to make this right? I glanced at Thomas, who gave me a subtle nod. We had discussed this possibility. Yes, I said. There are conditions under which I would consider revising my will again. Anything, Jackson said quickly. Whatever it is. First, family counseling. You, me, and Allison. Weekly sessions for at least 6 months. He nodded rapidly. Done. What else? Complete financial transparency. I want to see all your accounts, debts, assets, everything. And I want to help you create a realistic plan to address your financial issues without sacrificing your family's well-being. That is fair, he agreed, though he looked uncomfortable. Third, I will not be moving back in with you. I need my independence, and our relationship needs boundaries. But I do want to remain actively involved in my grandchildren's lives. Of course, Jackson said. The kids miss you terribly. Emma keeps asking when Grandpa is coming home. I felt a pang at that, but stayed firm. Finally, you will write a letter of apology to each of your rental tenants, explaining that you had no authority to contact them about changing their payment arrangements. Jackson winced but nodded. I will do all of that, Dad. I swear. There is one more thing, I added. This is not a condition for changing my will, but something I need you to understand. What hurt most was not the attempt to take my money, but the disrespect, the rewriting of our history together, the suggestion that I had somehow failed you as a father by not remarrying or earning more. For the first time, genuine remorse showed in Jackson's eyes. "I know," he whispered, "and that is unforgivable. I do not even know why I said those things. I have always been proud to be your son, always admired how you raised me on your own." I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But another part remained wary, unsure if this apparent contrition was genuine or simply motivated by the revelation of my true financial status. "We will take this one step at a time," I said finally. "Actions, not words, will rebuild trust between us." As Jackson left Thomas's office that day, shoulders hunched and head bowed, I felt no triumph, no vindication. Only a profound sadness for what had been broken between us, and a cautious hope that perhaps, with time and effort, it might yet be mended. 6 months have passed since that meeting in Thomas's office. The seasons have changed, summer giving way to fall, and now winter approaches, bringing with it holidays and the inevitable family gatherings that accompany them. Much has changed in these months, both within me and in my relationship with Jackson and his family. I remained in my apartment, gradually transforming it from a temporary refuge into a true home. I bought furniture I liked, hung photographs of happier times, planted herbs on my small balcony. The neighbors, mostly younger professionals with busy lives, are friendly in passing. Mrs. Delgado, a widow about my age who lives across the hall, has become a good friend. We often share coffee in the morning, comparing notes on our grandchildren and recommending books to each other. The family counseling sessions were difficult at first. Jackson was defensive, Allison resentful, and I struggled to articulate decades of complex emotions. Our therapist, Dr. Martinez, was patient but firm, guiding us through painful conversations with compassion and clarity. By the third session, Jackson broke down completely, admitting to feelings of inadequacy that had plagued him for years. "I always felt I needed to be as strong as you, Dad," he confessed, tears streaming down his face. "You sacrificed everything for me, and I thought I had to prove it was worth it by being perfectly successful. When things started falling apart financially, I could not bear for you to see me fail." "Failing at something does not make you a failure, son," I told him, my own eyes wet. "And asking for help is not weakness, it is wisdom." Over time, we established new patterns of interaction. Sunday dinners at my apartment became a tradition, with everyone pitching in to cook and clean up. I taught Emma and Tyler to make Dorothy's famous apple pie, passing down recipes and stories about their grandmother. These moments, flour dusting their small hands as they carefully crimped the edges of the crust, brought back memories of teaching Jackson the same skills decades ago. True to his word, Jackson provided complete transparency about his financial situation. It was worse than I had feared, with credit card debt approaching $80,000 and their mortgage underwater after a dip in the housing market. His job was indeed precarious, with his company planning significant restructuring. With Thomas's help, we developed a comprehensive plan, including refinancing, debt consolidation, and careful budgeting. "We might need to sell the house," Jackson admitted during one of our planning sessions. "Move somewhere more affordable. Your home should bring comfort, not constant stress," I advised. "There is no shame in adjusting your lifestyle to match your resources." They did eventually sell the house, downsizing to a comfortable 3-bedroom in a neighborhood with excellent schools but less prestige. The relief on both their faces after closing was palpable, as if physical weight had been lifted from their shoulders. As for my will, I did revise it, though not entirely back to its original form. The new version established smaller, immediate trusts for Emma and Tyler's education, with Jackson and Allison as co-trustees alongside Thomas. The bulk of my estate would still pass to Jackson, but with oversight provisions to ensure responsible management. It was a compromise that acknowledged both his efforts to change and my responsibility to protect my grandchildren's interests. Beyond my immediate family, I found new purpose in unexpected places. I began volunteering at a senior center downtown, offering financial literacy workshops for retirees. Many, like me, had worked physical jobs their entire lives but lacked confidence in managing their retirement assets. Helping them navigate Social Security benefits, avoid scams, and stretch fixed incomes gave me profound satisfaction. I also reconnected with former colleagues from construction, men I had worked alongside for decades but lost touch with after retirement. We meet monthly for breakfast, sharing stories and supporting each other through the challenges of aging. Frank is battling prostate cancer, Mike is raising his grandchildren after his daughter's struggle with addiction, and Carlos is learning to live without his wife of 40 years. Together, we form a brotherhood of survivors, men who have weathered life's storms and emerged with hard-earned wisdom. Last week, Jackson was offered a new position with a smaller company. The salary is lower than his previous job, but the work is more meaningful, developing software for educational applications. For the first time in years, he told me, I am excited to go to work in the morning. Allison has started a small, home-based bakery business, selling specialty cakes for events. Emma and Tyler help with simple tasks after school, learning the satisfaction of creating something with their own hands, just as their father once learned from me on construction sites during summer breaks. As I reflect on the painful journey that brought us here, I realize that financial security, while important, was never the real issue between Jackson and me. Money was merely the battlefield where deeper conflicts played out, insecurities and expectations that had gone unexamined for too long. I had always prided myself on providing for Jackson materially, on ensuring he never went without necessities, as I sometimes had in my own childhood. But perhaps in focusing so much on financial stability, I had failed to teach him that true wealth lies in honesty, integrity, and the courage to be vulnerable with those you love. Jackson, in turn, had measured his worth primarily through financial success and status, believing that was what would make me proud. When that foundation began to crumble, so did his sense of self-worth, leading him to lash out at the very person whose approval he most craved. The crisis we weathered, painful as it was, forced us to confront these misunderstandings. It taught us that family relationships must be built on mutual respect and honesty, not obligation or financial interdependence. That love, while unconditional, does not mean accepting mistreatment or disrespect. That boundaries, clearly communicated and consistently maintained, strengthen connections rather than weaken them. For my part, I learned that advocating for myself is not selfish but necessary, that my worth is not determined solely by what I can provide for others, that at 68, I am not merely waiting out my remaining years but continuing to grow, to contribute, to build a life of meaning and purpose. The most important lesson, perhaps, is that healing is possible even after profound betrayal, but it requires both parties to commit fully to the difficult work of rebuilding trust. Jackson is not the same son who screamed at me to stop living off him. He is humbler now, more authentic, more aware of his own vulnerabilities. And I am not the same father who silently absorbed disrespect out of misplaced guilt or obligation. We are both learning, day by day, to form a new relationship based on mutual respect rather than outdated roles and expectations. This Thanksgiving, we will gather in my apartment, around a table that barely fits us all. We will eat turkey and Dorothy's apple pie, share what we are grateful for, and perhaps remember that the true legacy we leave behind is not measured in dollars or possessions, but in the values we embody and the love we share. I do not know what the future holds. None of us do. But I face it now with clarity and purpose, grateful for the painful lessons that brought me to this place of unexpected peace. If my story resonates with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced betrayal by someone you sacrificed for? Were you able to rebuild that relationship, or did you need to establish firm boundaries? Your experiences might help others navigating similar painful journeys. Please hit the like button if this story touched you. Subscribe to hear more life stories, and share with anyone who might need to hear that it is never too late to stand up for yourself with dignity and compassion. Thank you for listening to an old man's tale of heartbreak and healing. Remember, The truest wealth is measured not in dollars, but in self-respect and genuine connection.